He ignored her for 2 years, but now he's ready to start a mob war just to keep her. Gabriel Castile demands perfection, treating his secretary Clara like an invisible piece of office furniture. But when he orders her to dress up for a dangerous dinner with Russian thugs, he creates a monster. Stripped of her ugly tweeds and thick glasses, Clara emerges as a breathtaking, lethal mafia heir. She saves his empire in a single night, and suddenly, the ruthless boss is violently obsessed. The camera pushes slowly into the suffocating gloom of a private Manhattan dining room. Crystal chandeliers throw jagged, icy light across the heavy oak table. Listen to the z's. Gabriel Castile, a man who sculpted a criminal empire from blood and cold math, grips his crystal glass until his bones threaten to snap. The woman gliding through the towering doors is not his invisible, coffee-fetching secretary. She is wrapped in heavy, emerald silk, drifting like a vengeful ghost from a slaughtered family he thought he had buried forever. You and I have both made this fatal miscalculation. We ignore the quietest shadows in the room, blind to the fact that they are the ones holding the darkest, most ruinous truths about our fragile lives. Focus on Gabriel's face. Shadows carve him out of ice and sudden, merciless violence. He did not merely survive the underworld, he choked it into submission. By day, he reigned from a 65th floor glass cage, gutting corporations without a single blink. Night, he dismantled rival smuggling rings, demanding absolute terrifying perfection. One missed beat meant your total ruin. Yet, a colossal blind spot breathed right outside his heavy office door for 2 long years. The tragic irony is something we all do. We obsessively lock our heavy deadbolts to keep out the grinning monsters prowling the streets, completely forgetting to examine the faces of the people we have already welcomed into our own quiet homes. The lens shifts. We see Clara Hayes shivering under the fluorescent glare. In a ruthless syndicate fueled by sharp stilettos and desperate greed, she was a frail shadow glued to the wallpaper. She drowned her small frame in shapeless, tragic sweaters. Thick glasses and a painfully tight bun masked her exhaustion, effectively scrubbing away her true, lethal identity. Gabriel kept her close because her bland invisibility felt like safety. He never saw the titanium armor resting under her quiet skin. It is a slow poison we all swallow. We bury our true nature under agonizingly boring routines, Mots, just to survive the week. But if you glue a mask to your face for too long, the person you actually are slowly starves to death underneath. Watch her hands. They never shake. Clara moved through the violent chaos like a perfectly tuned instrument of silence. If Gabriel dragged himself into the suite at 3 a.m, spilling blood from a busted lip onto the Persian rug, any ordinary soul would have screamed. Clara never flinched. She simply passed him a freezing ice pack, poured 3 fingers of heavy single malt, and quietly erased his morning meetings. She was a total void. When Gabriel's voice tore through the intercom, demanding her presence, she merely adjusted her thick glasses and stepped into the den. You see, people who refuse to flinch at sudden destruction are not empty. They have just survived so many brutal hurricanes that the sound of breaking glass finally feels like home. Gabriel frames the massive floor-to-ceiling window, a doomed king watching his city prepare to burn. The dread rolling off his broad shoulders is heavy enough to crush bone. Without turning, he barks a gravelly order to kill his flight to Geneva and scorch his schedule for the following night. Clara barely blinks, asking about a pending merger while her pen hovers motionless. Gabriel finally turns, his eyes hollow and black with approaching doom. Business deals are dusted. Now, Viktor Ivanov has landed in New York, and the streets are about to drown in red. It is a bitter pill every one of us must eventually swallow. No matter how many steps you climb to outrun your history, your past only needs one lucky break to drag you back to the dirt. The camera catches it, a microscopic tremor in Clara's pale hand. The black ink stops flowing for a fraction of a heartbeat. It is a fatal crack in her armor, and Gabriel's predator eyes snap to the movement. He stares at her, frowning. Viktor Ivanov is not a rival. He is a butcher, and his sudden arrival guarantees a bloodbath. Gabriel murmurs that Ivanov demands a dinner meeting, bringing a new fiancé as a pathetic illusion of peace. Clara swallows a spike of pure panic, smoothly promising to secure a dining room while her mind shatters into a million pieces. This is the truth of our darkest moments. True bravery is not an empty chest without fear. Bravery is feeling your heart physically tear apart while keeping your voice perfectly steady. Clara's voice stays flat as she offers to summon Isabella, a delicate girl whose entire worth is built on rich parents and a vacant smile. Gabriel cuts the air with his hand, pacing like a caged wolf. The panic is eating him alive. He knows Isabella would drain 2 glasses of champagne, run her foolish mouth, and get them both slaughtered before the main course. He desperately needs a heavy anchor. He needs someone who will not shatter when suppressed pistols are drawn beneath the crisp white tablecloth. Gabriel looms over Clara's small desk, casting a long, dark shadow. When the blade is actually against our throats, we never beg for the glamorous to save us. We hunt for the quiet ones, the rare souls who know exactly how to sit in the dark and wait. Gabriel's terrifying glare pierces right through Clara's scratched lenses. He whispers that he needs a ghost, someone who understands the crushing weight of pure silence. Clara's knuckles whiten against her cheap clipboard. She weakly suggests hiring a high-end agency, the kind that supplies quiet girls for messy underworld nights. Gabriel steps closer, the air turning to ice. Ivanov destroys those girls for sport. He needs a woman tested in his own fire. He locks onto her terrified eyes, and the quiet room suddenly feels like a primed explosive. She breathes his name, a genuine, heartbreaking tremor escaping her chest. It is a devastating trap. When you spend your entire life trying to be invisible, you accidentally become the perfect weapon for the dark. Clara shrinks back into the plateau, clutching her pathetic clipboard as if pressed wood could stop a hollow-point bullet. But Gabriel is finished playing at being a civilized boss. He commands her to attend the dinner. Clara stammers, her throat tight, pleading that she lacks the glittering armor required for such a deadly stage. She warns that a savage like Ivanov will see her plainness as a brutal insult. Gabriel does not offer a single word of comfort. He draws his heavy titanium card and slides it across the polished mahogany. It halts at her shaking fingers. He orders her to transform. We spend years weaving comfortable little cages, entirely ignorant that one day someone will simply break the lock and drag us into the blinding light. He does not want a delicate flower. He demands a silent soldier wrapped in expectant skill. Panic claws its way up Clara's throat, threatening to choke her. For 2 grueling years, she kept the blood-soaked tragedy of her family name buried beneath faded sweaters and downcast eyes. Sitting across from a butcher like Ivanov could tear away her disguise and expose the terrifying truth of her bloodline. She practically begs Gabriel to look elsewhere. His response is a voice pulled straight from the frozen depths of hell. This is a command, not a choice. You and I know this agonizing lesson well. You can bury your old sins deep in the earth, but the heavy rain always comes. The past does not die. It just sits in the shadow, waiting to tap you on the shoulder. Gabriel's hollow threat echoes in Clara's chest as she forces open the heavy glass doors of an elite downtown boutique. The chilled air inside smells of crushed lilies and cold generational wealth. A sleek, predatory sales clerk named Genevieve glides across the marble floor. Her eyes drip with open disgust, dragging over Clara's tragic mustard sweater and exhausted shoes. The clerk asks to help, wielding her fake manners like a jagged, rusty knife. We watch this tragedy unfold constantly, do we not? People judge your entire existence by the cheap thread on your shoulders. They remain completely blind to the terrifying reality that the quiet, tired soul standing right in front of them might just be the match that burns their golden kingdom to the ground. The camera pushes in on Genevieve's vicious, arrogant smirk. She coldly informs Clara that the boutique does not carry clearance rack mistakes. But Clara has stared down the dark barrels of loaded guns. The petty venom of a retail worker does not even register on her frozen pulse. Moving with dead calm, Clara reaches into her frayed canvas tote. She retrieves Gabriel's heavy titanium card and drops it onto the glass display with a sharp, sickening crack. The room's suffocating snobbery shatters into dust. Genevieve's smug face twists into absolute horror as she babbles about private fitting rooms. It is a beautiful, chilling truth. Real power never raises its voice. Clara simply stares through the terrified girl, demanding her armor for a date with the devil. Step into this velvet-lined room with me and watch a tragedy unfold. The stylist nervously asks what color she prefers. Clara does not hesitate. Emerald green. It is a fatal choice. That color was the lifeblood of the Romano syndicate, violently erased 3 years ago. For years, Clara suffocated her soul, playing Gabriel's invisible secretary just to keep breathing. Wearing emerald tonight is begging for a bullet. But the ruined princess refuses to bow. We all learn this painful truth eventually. You can burn your past to ashes, but you can never truly outrun the ghosts in your blood. If she must dine with monsters, she will wear her family armor. Genevieve hurries out, blind to the beautiful doom she is about to deliver. The camera lingers on the stylist, who looks at Clara in her drab disguise and declares the tragic hair must go. Clara stands paralyzed, staring into the merciless mirror. She is drowning in thick glasses and shapeless fabric, a shell chosen to hide the coiled muscles of a woman surviving a silent war. She promises her racing heart this is only for one evening, a brief break in her agonizing masquerade. With trembling fingers, she pulls the hidden pins free. A heavy waterfall of dark chestnut crashes down her shoulders, and the timid facade shatters into dust. Genevieve gasps, completely breathless. We must remember that the heaviest lie we ever carry is the fake face we show the world. Your true self will always claw back to the light. Clara reaches up and slowly strips away those suffocating glasses, abandoning them on the edge of the vanity. The stylist lets out a sharp, genuine gasp. Without those thick lenses, Clara reveals a pair of lethal amber eyes, burning with unspeakable sorrow above dangerously sharp cheekbones. The timid secretary evaporates. In her place sits a terrifying, cold elegance that instantly suffocates the air in the room. Genevieve begins to unravel, desperate to know why anyone would bury such breathtaking beauty. Clara offers no warm smile, no gentle excuse. She simply stares straight through the glass, ordering the dress with the chilling calm of a ruined queen. Remember this. People veil their brilliance just to protect their fragile hearts. 2 agonizing hours bleed away into the shadows, and the transformation is done. Clara stares into the tall glass and for a fleeting, tragic heartbeat, genuine terror flashes across her face. The woman looking back is not the quiet assistant who dutifully fetches coffee. Fusion. It is Clarissa Romano, the phantom heiress of a slaughtered empire. She is poured into a devastating emerald silk gown that grips her waist before tearing open along her pale thigh. It is a masterpiece of pure danger. Her dark hair is sculpted into sweeping, vintage waves. She looks like a doomed siren, preparing to drown the very men who destroyed her family. The lesson is written in the rigid line of her spine. You can wrap a tiger in wool, but the claws remain hungry. They paint over her deep, silent sorrow with a subtle smoky shadow and a dark, crimson lip that screams of absolute danger. Staring back from the vanity is the undeniable face of a soul survivor. Right on cue, the heavy silence shatters. Gabriel sends a harsh text, demanding she hurry. Clara drags in a long, ragged breath, burying her rising panic deep in her ribs. She steps into towering black heels, their red soles a perfect match to the blood on her lips. She picks up a dark velvet clutch, carefully hiding her phone, her lipstick, and a custom titanium blade. She pushes out into the freezing night, a flawless weapon wrapped in silk. Listen closely to this truth. A beautiful face has never once stopped a speeding bullet. Down on the freezing pavement, a black armored vehicle idles quietly in the dark. Gabriel's heavy hitter, Matteo, leans against the rear door, dragging deeply on a cigarette. The unspoken tension is suffocating. Matteo hears the sharp, rhythmic click of her heels and turns his head. The cigarette literally falls from his parted lips to the hot concrete. His rough hand twitches instinctively toward the heavy gun hidden under his coat. It is the raw animal instinct of the violent streets. He senses an apex predator stepping into his territory, completely forgetting he is supposed to be her guard. He chokes out a ragged whisper. Clara simply offers him the ghost of a tragic smile. When you wear your scars as armor, you command the entire room. Matteo is practically malfunctioning, nodding blindly as he pulls open the heavy steel door. Clara slides into the dark, leather-scented back seat where Gabriel sits waiting. He is swirling a glass of amber bourbon, his sharp eyes locked onto a glowing screen. Dressed in a flawless black tuxedo, he looks like a handsome devil waiting to collect a tragic debt. Without even looking at her, he snaps a cruel remark about her being exactly 2 minutes late, and then he finally raises his dark eyes. The expensive tablet slips from his grip, crashing loudly onto the floorboards. The untouchable, violent king of the city is entirely paralyzed. Let this be a lesson to us all. If you want to break someone, let them feel arrogant first. The air inside that armored car suddenly turns thick enough to choke on. Gabriel, the brutal mastermind who brings grown men to their knees, cannot find a single breath to speak. He is completely drowning in the sight of those crimson lips, the plunging emerald silk, the flash of her bare leg, and those haunting amber eyes. Clara lets her timid secretary voice die right there in the shadows. He replaces it with a low, smooth tone, casually asking if they plan to sit in this freezing alley all night. Gabriel swallows hard, his jaw clenching against a violent wave of sudden, blinding jealousy over the woman he ignored for 2 entire years. It is a bitter reality we must all face. You cannot command who your soul bleeds for. Let us look at the shift in power here. Gabriel finally drags himself from his shock, barking at Matteo to drive. As yellow streetlights wash over the tinted glass, Gabriel sits stiff as a corpse, losing his mind. For 2 miserable years, he treated this broken woman like invisible furniture. Now, he can only focus on the frantic pulse beating against her bare collarbone. But Clara is an absolute glacier. She does not nervously adjust her dress, and she does not look away. She simply radiates the terrifying energy of a queen reclaiming her throne. Here is a truth for anyone who feels unseen. Real confidence is absolutely silent. While Gabriel spirals into madness, she shifts the entire balance of the world without moving a single muscle. Through the heavy hum of the engine, Gabriel leans in close, his voice dropping to a gravelly, desperate whisper. He tells her she is playing a fatally foolish game, demanding to know who taught her to bury her true self so deeply. Clara does not even flinch. She looks straight into the dark abyss of his eyes and smoothly replies that survival is the cruelest teacher of all. She calls him Mr. Castile, but the formal title sounds like pure poison dripping from lips painted in blood. He lets out a dark, ragged laugh, confessing that if he had known about the weapon hiding beneath those clothes, he would never have let her inside. Keeping your deepest wounds and highest cards hidden is the ultimate, undeniable power play. Clara does not miss a single tragic beat, softly whispering that it is a very good thing she kept those awful glasses on for so long. Her amber eyes burn with a quiet, agonizing defiance just as the heavy car glides to a stop. Matteo is still visibly patient, but he manages to pull her door open into the bitter cold. Clara steps out onto the pavement with the deadly, fluid grace of a starving panther. Gabriel quickly buttons his dark jacket, his raw instinct screaming that he is no longer the most dangerous thing in the night. He offers her his arm, and the moment her bare, warm skin grazes his sleeve, his entire body turns to solid stone. True chemistry bypasses logic entirely, hitting you directly in the chest like a stray bullet. Gerard routinely pours $1,000 wine for kings without a single drop of sweat. But as Gabriel and Clara approach the glass doors, the man completely loses his grip on reality. His polished smile shatters for a heavy second before he remembers how to breathe, bowing low and whispering that she looks breathtaking. Gabriel feels a sick, violent twist of rage pool in his chest. He presses his hand hard against the bare curve of Clara's spine, the heat of her skin driving him to madness. He growls at Gerard to take them to the private room immediately, desperately wanting to tear off his jacket to shield her from the starving eyes of the room. It is a tragic flaw of human nature. The beautiful things we try so desperately to hide are exactly what the greedy world wants to steal. Gabriel and Clara move down the dim, velvet-lined hallway. Anyone else would stare at the glittering chandeliers, but Gabriel watches her amber eyes searching the shadows. She is silently counting fire exits, analyzing the waiters, and calculating if a brass vase could crush a skull. She is mentally preparing for a bloodbath. Gabriel grips her waist tighter, his heart hammering violently, desperate to uncover the monster hiding beneath her flawless skin. They push through the oak doors into a room that practically reeks of death. At the head of the table sits Viktor Ivanov, a scarred boss in a tailored suit. You and I both know the absolute truth of this life. The quietest souls in any given room are always the deadliest ones waiting to strike. Next to Victor sits Katerina, suffocating under diamonds so heavy you can almost feel the ache in her neck. Behind him loom two massive hitmen, hands hovering near the steel hidden in their coats. Victor booms with an arrogant laugh, knocking back his vodka. But the second Gabriel and Clara step through those doors, that careless laughter dies completely. The silence becomes thick enough to choke on. Victor's icy gaze abandons Gabriel entirely, locking onto Clara instead, his jaw dropping in unfiltered shock. Beside him, Katerina feels the room freeze, her eyes narrowing with a burning jealousy. It serves as a stark reminder for all of us. Flashy stones can never purchase genuine loyalty, and you should never anchor your self-worth to the wandering attention of somebody else. Let us carefully unpack this masterclass in tension. Even Victor's guards shift nervously, acting like they just stepped on hot coals. Gabriel radiates a pure, territorial fury. He pulls Clara tight against his side, broadcasting an unspoken warning for every man to back off. He delivers an icy apology for being late, his voice sharper than a fresh razor. But Victor is entirely shameless. He sets his drink down, his eyes glued to Clara with a disturbing hunger, flashing a greasy smile. He actually has the nerve to say Gabriel upgraded his usual company, a blatant insult right out of the gate. Always remember this vital truth. The way someone looks at the person standing beside you tells you absolutely everything you need to know about their true character and hidden motives. Victor jokes that Gabriel's previous girl must be crying into her drink. Gabriel ignores the cheap bait, pulling out a chair for Clara and flatly introducing her as his associate. Victor rolls the word associate around in his mouth like a rare cigar. Leaning closer, he asks what an exquisite associate actually does for a crime boss. Clara does not even blink. She meets his gaze and replies with a beautifully calm, fearless tone, stating that she keeps his operations running flawlessly. Then, she coldly adds that she personally handles their complications. Victor throws his head back and barks out a laugh, pretending she just made a cute joke. It perfectly proves a timeless rule of survival. Underestimating the quiet ones in the room is always the fastest way to get yourself completely ruined. Victor leans onto the table, calling Clara a woman with real fire. He warns Gabriel there better not be any complications while they discuss the Baltimore ports. Waiters silently bring out five-star food, but they might as well be chewing on dry dirt. The tension in the room is entirely suffocating. Gabriel tries his best diplomacy, pushing back against Victor's demand for a larger slice of the shipping money. But internally, Gabriel is fighting a brutal battle. Every time Victor shoots another greasy, disrespectful look at Clara, Gabriel goes to war with himself to not pull his weapon and paint the expensive wallpaper with the man's blood. It serves as a harsh reminder. Keeping your absolute composure when someone pushes your exact buttons is the hardest, yet most vital skill you can master. Step into this dimly lit dining room with me. Notice the framing. Clara plays a heavy psychological game while these men fumble with checkers. She takes tiny bites, yet her sharp eyes track everything. Gabriel catches her brilliance. A gentle shift of her water glass, using the reflection to spot Victor's muscle-flashing hand signals in the shadows. She navigates this shark tank like a breezy walk on the shore. Gabriel cuts the tension, firmly telling Victor that 40% of the docks is a pure delusion. He reminds him that the unions only bleed for real cash, not cheap intimidation. Victor's arrogant smirk dies, replaced by a cold, reptilian stare. This teaches us a beautiful truth. True confidence never needs to shout. It simply needs to be fiercely observant. The room grows tense as Victor claims Gabriel's crew has grown soft, while his own men bleed on the concrete. He vows to burn the dockyard to ash if denied his cut. Then, his fiancée Katerina decides to speak. Swirling her red wine, she wears a mocking grin, telling Gabriel to stick to tailored suits and parading pretty girls at dinner. The silence is deafening. A fatal miscalculation. Gabriel freezes, knuckles white around his steak knife. You can feel the violent storm swelling in his gaze. But just before he snaps, Clara calmly dabs her lips with a linen napkin and leans right into the heavy crossfire. This proves a vital point about human nature. Letting a fragile ego run your mouth puts you in the sights of someone entirely out of your league. Watch closely now. Clara goes into absolute savage mode. She looks at Katerina, her tone sweet but holding the edge of a razor. She compliments her vintage necklace. Blinded by vanity, Katerina takes the bait, bragging that Victor bought the piece in Paris. Then Clara drops the guillotine. She murmurs how romantic that is, noting how the heavy diamonds distract from the fresh track marks hiding on Katerina's left arm. The devastation is cinematic. Katerina drains of blood, clutching her arm in pure panic. Humiliated, Victor snaps his head toward her. He slams a fist onto the wood, roaring about Clara's sheer insolence. It is a harsh life lesson. If you plan to throw stones at others, make absolutely certain your own closet is completely spotless first. The crystal glasses rattle from the impact of Victor's fury. His goons step from the shadows, hands sliding into dark coats. Gabriel locks into pure focus. Under the table, his fingers grip cold steel. Quietly clicking the safety off, he growls a warning for Victor to sit down, radiating a lethal authority. But look at Clara. She is an absolute menace. She does not flinch a single muscle or break her elegant posture. Instead, she locks her amber eyes directly onto this seething mob boss, her presence shifting into something profoundly dangerous. Without blinking, she commands him to make his dogs drop their weapons. It teaches us an unforgettable truth. True power is never about who screams the loudest. It is about who can stare into the eyes of pure chaos and absolutely refuse to blink. Clara did not just speak Russian. She delivered flawless native Russian using a brutal gutter slang that only the elite of the Moscow syndicate would dare to whisper. Gabriel hides his quiet shock, knowing he could never replicate that jagged accent. Victor physically deflates. The color drains from his face as trembling fear bleeds into his eyes. Stripped of his arrogant swagger, he croaks out a terrified whisper, asking who she is. Clara shows zero mercy. In a deadly smooth tone, she promises that if his men draw their guns, she will open his throat with the blade hidden in her purse, long before Gabriel fires a single shot. This serves as a brilliant reminder. Always keep your greatest strengths buried in the dark, waiting for the exact moment they can inflict the most catastrophic damage. Notice the shift in the room's power dynamic. Clara flips back to English, ticking a beat. Her hands are steady as she lifts her wine glass to lay down the new law. Victor gets 25% of the ports, leaves the unions alone, and teaches his girl basic manners. Taking a casual sip, she tells him he can take the deal now, or try his luck making it out of the restaurant alive. Victor gulps in terror, shooting a desperate glance at Gabriel for a lifeline. Gabriel sits in total silence, hiding his own massive shock behind a flawless poker face. He smartly stays quiet, knowing better than to interrupt an apex predator while she hunts. The vital lesson here is incredibly clear. When someone on your team is truly thriving in their element, you simply step back and let them work. Let us watch the camera slowly push in on this final moment. Victor is sweating, choking on his own breath. His hand shakes violently in the dim light as he signals his men to stand down. Clara offers a sweet, perfect smile, but her eyes remain absolute ice. She casually asks about dessert. Beneath the heavy oak table, Gabriel releases his grip on his weapon. The realization hits him like a punch. His quiet secretary is a phantom, a lethal operative who just broke a crime boss without a second thought. Gabriel leans closer, inhaling the faint scent of warm vanilla layered over the bitter burn of gunpowder. It offers a brutal, lasting reminder for us all. The people who look the softest, the ones we stop paying attention to, are almost always the ones carrying the most devastating secrets. Sit with me and let us watch this dynamic fracture completely. Gabriel leans in tight. His breath brushes her ear, dropping a whisper so coated in quiet menace it would break a weaker person. He promises an agonizing talk about her true identity once they reach his penthouse. Clara stares out the window, perfectly still, but the camera catches the faintest tremor in her pale fingers. Her flawless armor is finally cracking. Outside the heavy black car, the midnight rain weeps violently against the tinted glass, mirroring the suffocating storm trapped inside the cabin. The silence is so heavy, even the driver barely breathes. The hardest lesson we can pull from this is simple. You can bury your history under silk and shadows for years, but your past always remembers your real name. Gabriel remains frozen in the frame. His stare is so heavy it could leave a bruise on her pale cheek. He vibrates with a dizzying mix of pure betrayal, raw shock, and a dark magnetic pull he desperately wants to strangle with his bare hands. Harsh red neon from the street below slices across her sharp jawline. Right then, the tragedy fully lands. His quiet secretary is dead. The woman beside him is an ice-cold stranger who just broke an enforcer in his native tongue. Clara never even blinks. Her hands stay neatly folded over the purse, hiding her blade. It makes you think about your own life for a second. We often believe we build our thickest walls just to keep the outside monsters away, but in reality, we build them to keep our own broken pieces safely trapped inside. The camera holds on Gabriel. He watches her frantically try to stitch the harmless ghost of Clara back into reality. But the act is dead. The black car glides into the concrete belly of his high-rise, and Gabriel refuses to wait for his driver. He shoves the heavy door open, stepping into the freezing garage. He offers no hand, no trace of grace. His jaw is locked like stone as he orders her into his private elevator. She says absolutely nothing. She walks like a condemned prisoner, stepping blindly into the glass box that shoots them up into the dark sky. It leaves us with a bitter truth to chew on. Once a massive lie is finally exposed to the light, you lose the safety of the dark forever. You can never go back to pretending. The glass elevator climbs higher, dragging them up into a freezing silence where the air feels painfully thin. Stay with me here, because this is where the real damage starts. The steel doors slide open, revealing his massive penthouse. The lighting is cold. The space feels much more like a marble tomb than a home. Black floors stretch out like a frozen lake, while thick glass holds back the glittering teeth of the city. Gabriel marches straight to his bar, running purely on betrayal and blind rage. He cracks open a heavy crystal bottle, pours 2 glasses of dark liquor, and turns around. But he keeps both glasses firmly trapped in his own hands. It proves a quiet, crushing lesson about human nature. The person who controls the smallest comforts in a room always holds the leash. Gabriel slowly sheds his coat. The camera tracks the heavy wool, falling to the floor like dead skin. Moving with terrifying slowness, he unclips his holster. The cold steel of his Glock 19 slams hard against the marble counter. The crack echoes off the massive windows like a gunshot in the dark. It is a wordless, brutal statement about who truly owns the oxygen in that room. He orders her to drink. Clara stays glued to the spot. Against the suffocating dark tones of the penthouse, her green dress shimmers like a bright warning sign. She never flinches at the gun, and she refuses to look at the drink. She just absorbs the agonizing silence. This offers a deeply humbling lesson for our own lives. True power never needs to scream. It simply lays its weapons down and waits for you to blink first. Notice the lighting here. cold blue neon bleeds through the glass, catching the violent tremor. Clara desperately swallows. She looks at him, trying to play the polite secretary turning down a drink. She forces a smile, mentions grabbing a cab, and promises to be at a desk by 7:30. Gabriel just lets out a hollow, scraping laugh that sucks the air out of the room. He takes a slow drag of his whiskey, his dark eyes locking onto her with the cold patience of a predator. His voice drops to a gravelly whisper, asking if she really thinks there is a desk left for her to return to. He steps into her space. It proves a brutal but honest lesson about survival. Once you strip off your mask and show the world your true face, your old disguise is never going to fit you again. Gabriel stops a mere 2 feet away. His broad shoulders block out the skyline, plunging Clara entirely into his shadow. The camera lingers on the heavy tensions as he methodically tears down her defenses. He whispers, asking if she really plans to wear her fake reading glasses and play the quiet girl at dawn. He is close enough to catch the scent of jasmine buried under her cold sweat. Step by step, he lists her sins from tonight. The way she stared down a Russian boss, the flawless street slang, how she played his elite guards for total fools. Clara holds her ground, but the frantic pulse hammering in her throat betrays her completely. It points to a simple, undeniable fact of life we all must face. You can easily hide your ordinary flaws, but true, dangerous talent will always bleed out into the open. Clara tries to hold her ground, whispering that she was only smoothing over a minor complication. That single word snaps his control like dry wood. Gabriel shatters the quiet with a roar of pure, unfiltered rage, a sound so violently raw her entire body flinches. His heavy hand clamps down onto her bare shoulder. The burning heat of his palm clashes against the freezing air of the room, his fingers digging in tight to lock her in place. The shot is tight here, capturing the genuine agony burning behind his dark eyes. He leans in inches away, snarling that for 2 long years she held the keys to his secret accounts and his darkest sins. It forces us to swallow a very hard lesson about connection. Trusting someone feels warm, but handing a total stranger the loaded gun of your deepest secrets will always end in tragedy. Gabriel calls her a walking lie, sleeping right at the center of his empire. Then, the violence shifts. His thumb slowly brushes across her collarbone, a touch so shockingly gentle it makes the breath catch painfully in her throat. He demands to know who sent her. The feds? Interpol? A rival family? That accusation shatters her act completely. Clara drops the polite mask, shoving both hands hard against his chest. But he feels like a solid wall of iron. He refuses to yield a single inch. She fires back, her voice shaking with raw, desperate anger. She swears she is no rat, screaming that she only hid inside his operation because his shadow was the only place dark enough to keep her alive. It shows a grim reality about human nature. Total desperation will make a person knock on the devil's front door just to ask for a place to sleep. Gabriel narrows his eyes, searching her terrified gaze for any trace of a lie. He demands to know what threat could possibly make her run this scared. Stick with me, because the entire scene shifts right here. The fight completely drains out of Clara. Her hands fall limp. She turns to the bright skyline she used to call a shield, her voice dropping to a broken whisper. She confesses she is running from the men who slaughtered her family. Instantly, Gabriel's iron grip loosens. You can see his mind racing, pulling up years of street rumors to verify the blood in her story. It serves as a haunting reminder we all forget too often. Every single person you walk past is fighting a heavy, quiet war you know absolute nothing about. In this tragic frame, He is finally seeing the wounded child hiding beneath her steel armor. Gabriel leans in closer, the shadows harsh against his face. His voice drops to a rough whisper as he demands her real name. Clara finally meets his eyes, her defensive walls completely stripped away. She takes a slow, shaking breath and absolutely destroys the ground beneath him. She tells him her name is Clarissa Romano. A suffocating, dead silence instantly floods the cold penthouse. Gabriel actually stumbles backward, taking the brutal weight of that name right in the chest like a physical punch. He stares at her, looking as though a bleeding ghost just crawled out of his marble floors. In their violent world, Romano is pure royalty written in blood. It brings us back to a profound, unshakable truth about life itself. Your past will always hunt you down. You can burn your old clothes and run forever, but you can never escape your own blood. Let us look at this piece by piece together. You and I both know that power is an illusion, but this dark history changes the whole board. For 50 years, the Romano family held Chicago in an absolute, suffocating chokehold. They were the untouchable kings of the old ways. But 3 winters ago, the Moretti crew moved in, backed by endless cartel cash. On a freezing night in February, they butchered the entire Romano bloodline in one massive sweep. Boss, sons, soldiers, all gone. The papers called it a tragic gang war, but the streets knew it was total extinction. Everyone thought that family was turned to dust. It leaves us with a painful lesson we should all remember. No fortress stands forever. You can hold the world in your hands today and be wiped out by tomorrow morning. Comfort is the silent killer of any empire. Gabriel stands there, tasting the heavy truth of her name. He remembers the youngest Romano daughter was supposed to be safely locked away in London. Clarissa lets out a dark, bitter laugh, the sound scraping against the quiet room. She explains she was flying home for her father's birthday, but a snowstorm grounded her plane halfway there. By the time she landed, her entire family had been wiped off the earth. Gabriel stares as the jagged puzzle pieces violently snap together. Her enemies had put a $5 million price tag on her head. It proves a wild point about fate. Sometimes, the annoying delay that ruins your afternoon is actually just the universe pulling you out of the line of fire. A simple delay can easily save your life. Clarissa slowly lifts her chin, the pale light catching the empty pride in her eyes. She tells him straight out that those men are still hunting her. She needed a heavy fortress where those killers would never be brave enough to step foot. Gabriel's face goes pitch black as the ugly reality sets in. She picked his family on purpose. She admits her cold strategy out loud. His syndicate was the only crew strong enough to scare her enemies. She hid behind his giant wall of security, quietly turning his men into her personal armor. Gabriel snarls at her, spitting out the fact that she used him. But staying alive is a deeply ugly business. When your actual life is on the line, playing fair goes right out the window. True survival means grabbing anything you can find to block the bullets. You do whatever it takes to wake up tomorrow. Clarissa fires right back, and the shattered Mafia princess finally wakes up. She steps toward him, screaming that her metrics were flawless. She doubled his revenue, caught the thieves he missed, and never asked for a single dime over her salary. A perfectly fair trade in her eyes. But Gabriel completely loses his mind. He yells that she is a massive security breach, crossing the room in 2 terrifying strides to back her hard against the glass. The cold abyss of the city glitters behind her spine. He can see her pulse jumping. It is a harsh truth to swallow, but hard work never repairs a foundation built on a lie. You can be the sharpest mind in the room, but If your shadow brings a storm, no amount of good deeds can erase the fatal threat you carry. Gabriel slams his heavy hands against the freezing glass on both sides of her head, completely caging her in. His breath ghosts over her trembling face as he snarls about the fatal danger she dragged into his world. If the cartel uncovers her identity, they will firebomb his clubs and ignite a massive street war. Clarissa is pressed flat against the pane, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. She gasps that nobody knows she is here. But Gabriel roars back that Viktor Ivanov absolutely knows. The tragedy of the human condition is that we never truly control the ripple effects of our own secrets. You might think you have your ghosts perfectly contained in the dark, but one tiny slip can cause a tidal wave that drowns everyone around you. Her secret is out, and the tsunami is already here. Gabriel lays out the brutal truth. The Russian boss watched her move like a highly trained killer. He heard her slip up and use elite gang slang in a moment of pressure. It is only a matter of hours before he matches her face to the dead Romano princess, selling that intel to the cartel for prime real estate. Clarissa catches her breath sharply. For the very first time, pure panic flashes in her dark eyes. She whispers frantically that she has a go bag ready, promising to flee the country so she does not bring a bloody war to his front door. The lesson here is as heavy as lead. Pride will always be your most expensive mistake. She wanted to show off her lethal skills for just one single minute, and that fleeting ego trip just cost her the only safe haven she had left in the world. You and I must look closely at this quiet shift. Gabriel stares at her trembling red lips and the terrified pulse jumping in her neck. He sees how that ruined emerald silk clings to her slender frame. A violent, irrational, possessive instinct claws its way up his throat. She is a walking target who could easily burn his criminal empire to ashes. Yet he knows with terrifying certainty she is not walking out that door. He drops his voice into a dark whisper, telling her she is not going anywhere, warning her the Russians will hunt her down. The beautiful, chaotic truth of life is this: we do not choose who we feel fiercely protective over. The heart simply decides, and all logic flies out the window the second you truly care about someone. The physical space tells a profound story. Gabriel pins Clarissa against the cold glass, crowding into her personal zone. He tells her if the Morettas find her, she is practically a ghost in a week. She wanted his protection and his massive walls, so he leans in, whispering by her ear, and drops the twisted line about her getting a promotion. By morning, the bright sun is blasting over the East River, flooding his expensive penthouse. Clarissa has been awake all night, pacing relentlessly around this huge room full of white silk and cold steel. It is supposed to be a secure safe house, but as she stares out at the waking city below, it feels exactly like a high-altitude prison cell. It proves that true freedom is a state of mind, not just a physical location. The massive mahogany door is locked tight, and his heavy hitter has been standing guard all night. Clarissa could see his shadow creeping under the doorframe. Suddenly, the deadbolt clicks, and her blood turns to ice. In walks Gabriel, trading his sharp tuxedo for a dark charcoal suit, looking dangerously relaxed. He holds 2 steaming mugs of coffee, completely flipping the established script. For 2 straight years, she handed him his morning brew like clockwork. Now, the king of the New York underworld is playing room service. It is a striking visual reminder that the roles we play in life can flip in a single heartbeat. When the power dynamic shifts so drastically, you simply have to adapt. Gabriel steps fully inside, his cold, calculating eyes sweeping right over her. Clarissa still wears that stunning green gown, but it is completely wrecked. The silk hem is torn from her pacing like a caged animal, yet she looks absolutely captivating in her raw desperation. Gabriel sets her coffee on the glass table, taking a slow sip of his own. He murmurs it is black with 2 sugars, exactly how she likes it. She refuses to play his game, angrily accusing him of kidnapping her. Gabriel leans his massive frame against the door, crossing his arms, and calmly corrects her. He calls it a quarantine. Then he casually drops the bomb that he spent the entire night tearing apart the fake life she worked so hard to build. It teaches us a brutal lesson. You can never build a sturdy, lasting future on a foundation of forged paper and fragile lies. Gabriel explains his top intelligence guys ran a deep background check on her fake identity. He asks what they found, and she bitterly admits they found nothing. Gabriel lists off her fake social security number and the forged birth certificate from a conveniently burned down town. Her digital history was so painfully boring, it practically screamed witness protection. He warns her that her expensive cover is completely cooked. The Russian boss is already making calls, and soon the Bratva will know exactly who she really is. Clarissa begs him to let her go, desperately wanting to vanish to Europe so she does not drag his syndicate into a bloody war. We learn a fascinating truth here. Flawless perfection is often the biggest red flag of all, because a real human life is always messy. Gabriel shuts that escape plan down instantly. His voice drops into a dark tone commanding absolute obedience. He steps right up to her, closing the distance until they are mere inches apart. You can practically feel the danger radiating off him. He explains, Victor is furious over some drama at the Baltimore ports. If the Russian boss figures out Gabriel is hiding the last Romano heir, he will team up with the Morettis to launch a full-scale assault on his empire. Clarissa looks terrified, feeling like a dead woman walking. But then, Gabriel goes completely soft. His massive hand reaches out, gently cupping her pale face, like she is made of fragile glass. It is a stark reminder that the most dangerous individuals often harbor the most surprising, quiet tenderness. Let us freeze the frame right here. You and I know this vulnerability is a ghost in their world. Gabriel is a lethal real weapon, yet he treats her with terrifying gentleness, swearing she will survive. The illusion is dead. The real Clarissa Romano is stepping into the light. She pulls back, eyes wide with panic, knowing the Morettis will unleash a wave of killers. But Gabriel tilts his head, a predatory smile carving his jaw. He wants them to try. He wants them to break against his artillery. He will hide her right out in the open. When she breathes out, asking how, his fingers draw a dark blue velvet box from his coat. It teaches us a simple truth. Sometimes, the most brazen move is your only path to survival, and the only way to outlive the storm is to become the lightning. The camera lingers on the heavy quiet. Every breath sounds like thunder. Inside the velvet box rests 10 carats of flawless diamond secured in cold platinum. The jewel catches the dim light, casting fractured rainbows across the dark. Clarissa stops breathing entirely. Gabriel steps closer. His voice drops into a possessive, gravelly whisper. He tells her the only way to protect a priceless thing is to own it completely. The rival cartels are vicious, but they bow to the old blood rules. Killing a foot soldier means nothing, but touching a boss's wife? That demands absolute apocalypse. It forces us to realize a difficult lesson. In this unforgiving life, hiding will only get you buried. To survive the incoming storm, you must step forward and let them see your fire. Let us look closely at the tragedy unfolding. Clarissa stares at the heavy stone, desperately calculating the angles. She prays he wants a convenient lie, a fake engagement. But Gabriel crushes that hope into dust. He demands a public blood oath, broadcast to every enemy watching from the dark. Slowly, he takes her left hand. His grip is unyielding iron, leaving no room for retreat. The platinum slides onto her finger, a perfect, terrifying fit. In her heart, it feels exactly like a rusted padlock snapping shut. This is the bitter cost of her sanctuary. She must wear his name, sleep in his bed, and rule his violent empire. It deeply reminds us that absolute safety is never free. Every shelter we seek in this hard world will always demand a piece of our spirit as the final rent. The camera holds as Clarissa forces her eyes from the diamond to meet Gabriel's gaze. The sight makes her blood freeze. A dark, obsessive fire burns behind his eyes. He knows the quiet assistant she used to be is entirely dead, and he ends to claim the survivor left in her ashes. She whispers her defiance, asking what happens if she refuses. Gabriel leans in, his warm breath brushing her neck. He tells her softly she will not walk away. Out here in the deep water, he is the only lifeboat left. It is a harsh truth we must all learn. Survival rarely looks like gentle salvation. Most of the time, it looks exactly like a beautiful cage. By sunrise, news of their engagement floods the city. Wall Street and the underground are thrown into absolute panic over this massive shift in power. You and I know how the machine grinds when a dangerous takes a bride. The media loses its mind. Tabloids tear through the city, desperate for any truth about the woman who tamed the monster. Yet his people release only one vague statement, executing a masterclass in psychological torture. Gabriel dangles a piece of bait, watching his enemies choke on their own rising panic. 3 nights later, the trap is set at a lavish gala inside the Pierre Hotel. This is meant to be neutral ground. The grand room is choking with corrupt politicians, silent billionaires, and ruthless syndicate bosses. The air feels thick with cold violence. It goes to show a powerful reality in life. The loudest, most devastating message you can ever deliver to those who wish you harm is total, absolute silence. This gilded ballroom is the altar where he will reveal his queen. Clarissa stands before a towering mirror, barely recognizing the stranger staring back. The quiet girl from 3 days ago is gone. Tonight, she is dressed for war. She wears midnight velvet that grips her curves like a second skin, falling away to leave her spine bare. A heavy diamond choker rests cold against her throat, highlighting the sharp lines of her face. She looks absolutely lethal. We often forget that our greatest armor in life is rarely made of steel, but of the beautiful masks we force ourselves to wear. Gabriel steps into the doorway, adjusting his silk tie, and his hands suddenly stop. He freezes. His dark eyes drag over her reflection, absorbing every inch of the weapon he forged. The heat from his stare carries a suffocating weight. He glides up behind her, his large hands settling against her bare waist. A single finger traces the delicate curve of her spine. He murmurs that the perimeter is secure, pressing a burning kiss just behind her ear. She shivers, disgusted by her own body for craving the warmth of her captor. Then, he delivers the brutal blow. The Russian boss is here, and Christian Moretti landed an hour ago. Her worst nightmare breathes the same city air. It is a bitter, inescapable truth of life. You can run from the ghosts of your past for years, but it only takes one quiet night for them to finally catch up. Gabriel spins her to face him, his expression dripping with dark, triumphant glory. The terrified enemy finally swallowed the bait. Stick with me, because the tension is becoming unbearable. Moretti is arriving to see if the rumors of the Romano heir returning from the dead are true. Clarissa feels her face turn to stone. If he recognizes her, he will erase her bloodline. Calmly, she drops a titanium blade into her velvet purse. Gabriel flashes a cruel smirk, peeling back his tuxedo jacket to reveal the heavy iron strapped against his ribs. He whispers that it is time to remind the city what happens when you back a Romano into a corner. They step out, looking down at a ballroom drowning in fake smiles and champagne. As they slowly descend the grand staircase, the room goes dead silent. The lesson here is simple for us to remember. True power never has to shout to make an entire room hold its breath. Every face in the room turns to watch them. A suffocating wave of whispers washes over the crowd. Clarissa carries the agonizing weight of her past like a crown, keeping her chin high and her eyes cold. Gabriel guides her through the sea of predators, ignoring their venomous glares. He leans close, brushing his lips against her hair like a lover, quietly feeding her tactical intel. He murmurs that Ivanov is standing at 2 o'clock. Clarissa lets her gaze drift. Viktor Ivanov is frozen by the champagne tower, his scarred face turning a sickly white. He finally realizes exactly who she is. There is a brutal truth hidden in this tragedy. You can run as far as you want, but your dark sins will always catch up to you, right when you feel safe. Clarissa flashes a flawless smile for the cameras, whispering to let the coward run. Gabriel tells her to keep her eyes locked on the main doors. The wait is agonizingly short. 10 minutes later, those heavy oak doors are shoved open and the temperature in the room instantly plummets. Standing there, flanked by 4 thugs, is Christian Moretti. He wears a stark white tuxedo jacket that feels like an arrogant dare to the underworld. Christian sweeps his cold eyes over the crowd, ignoring the politicians, until his gaze slams into Gabriel. Then, slowly, his dark eyes shift to the beautiful ghost standing by Gabriel's side. The life lesson here is something we often forget. Arrogance is just a very loud, expensive mask, trying to hide a truly terrified and fragile heart. Clarissa does not blink. She stares directly into the eyes of the man who ordered the slaughter of her father and brothers. The agonizing fear she carried for 3 years evaporates, consumed by a dark thirst for vengeance. Christian's smug smile falls off his face. He stops breathing, staring at her like a walking corpse as he finally recognizes those amber eyes. He truly believed he had burned her bloodline to ashes. Gabriel flashes a twisted smile, murmuring that the Grim Reaper just crashed the party. Christian panics, whispering to his enforcer, whose hand slips inside his jacket for a gun. Clarissa calls the deadly threat out immediately. If there is a lesson in this tragedy, it is this. Never underestimate a broken soul who has absolutely nothing left to lose. Gabriel does not turn to look. He trusts her voice the second she spots a sniper rifle resting on the balcony. He roars for her to get down, and absolute hell breaks loose. Before the sniper can fire, Gabriel raises his pistol and shoots twice into the ceiling. He shatters a massive crystal chandelier directly above Christian and his crew. People scream as hundreds of pounds of sharp glass crash to the floor. Clarissa throws herself behind a stone pillar, feeling the velvet of her dress tear open. Gabriel is right there, burying her under his own solid weight as a storm of bullets begins shredding the room. Listen closely to this simple lesson. When the world starts burning down around you, trusting the person watching your back is the only way you will survive. Muzzle flashes tear through the velvet shadows of the ruined gala. Christian's men fire blindly as Gabriel's team shatters the heavy doors, turning the pristine ballroom into a brutal slaughterhouse. Gabriel grips her hand, screaming over the deafening gunfire to run for the kitchen. Suddenly, a soldier rises from the wreckage, his rifle aimed directly at Gabriel's spine. Gabriel's weapon is completely empty, the slide locked back in a terrifying metallic click. You and I need to look closely at this moment, right here in the smoke, because this is where Clarissa rewrites her destiny. She simply reaches into her purse, her hand perfectly steady, and draws a cold titanium blade. The lesson here is beautifully tragic. Preparation will always conquer panic. You must always keep one quiet, fatal secret buried in the dark. The camera lingers on her motion. There is an agonizing grace that only comes from a childhood steeped in violence. Clarissa moves with terrifying elegance, stepping into the dim light to drive the blade into the assassin's neck. She twists the steel with absolute precision. The man drops his rifle, choking as crimson quickly paints the white linen. She pulls the knife free, her eyes burning with a wildfire, her black dress heavy with blood. Gabriel simply stares at her through the drifting smoke and echoing screams. The quiet girl who filed his paperwork just executed a killer without a single blink, and the sight irreversibly hooks his soul. It is a dangerous, inescapable truth of our world. The people who make the least noise usually carry the sharpest knives. Always respect the quiet ones. They hide the deepest storms. Gabriel pulls her tight against his heaving chest while his men lock down the bleeding room. He manages a dark, breathless joke, begging her never to fetch his coffee again. Outside, wailing police sirens tear through the freezing New York night, bouncing violently off the towering shadows of Fifth Avenue. He kicks open the steel doors to the kitchen, dragging her into the sweltering heat. The room is abandoned, leaving behind overturned carts and boiling pots of rich soup that fill the air with the heavy scent of panic. Let us pause here and look at this together, just for a second. It does not matter how much money or power is sitting in the room. Chaos humbles every single person in exactly the same way. When the lead starts flying, the expensive caviar always bleeds right into the dirty floor. Come with me to the tragic aftermath. Down the dark alley of 61st Street, Mateo waits in the shadows. The engine of their armored truck growls like a wounded beast. Gabriel shoves Clarissa into the pitch-black back seat. Diving in right behind her, he roars at the driver just as the surviving gunmen open fire. Heavy bullets slam against the thick, ballistic glass like angry hail. The tires scream against the frozen asphalt as they tear into the blinding, neon-lit chaos of Manhattan traffic, leaving the ruined restaurant far behind. Inside that quiet, armored vault, the roaring adrenaline finally breaks, dropping them into a heavy, agonizing silence. You can drive fast to outrun the gunfire, but your body always keeps the exact score. Sooner or later, every single one of us has to face the quiet crash of our own survival. Clarissa collapses against the expensive leather seats, her chest heaving with desperate, ragged breaths. That beautiful black dress is completely ruined, heavily stained with the sticky blood of a cartel killer. Her shaking fingers are wrapped around that small knife so tightly her knuckles look like polished bone. Gabriel leans in close. With a surprising, heartbreaking tenderness, he wraps his scarred hands around hers, slowly prying the bloody steel from her frozen grip. He tosses the blade aside, his voice cracking as he asks if she took a bullet, his dark eyes frantically scanning her trembling frame for a fatal wound. We can look at this moment and see something profoundly real. Sometimes, the strongest souls are the ones gripping the hardest, and they simply need one safe pair of hands to help them let go. Clarissa pulls a slow, agonizing breath into her lungs, whispering that she is fine, while staring at hands coated with another man's blood. When she asks about Christian, a bitter disgust twists Gabriel's face. He drags a hand through his ruined hair, muttering that the coward slipped out the back door while his own loyal men died. But Christian lost everything tonight. The underground now knows she is no longer a ghost. She is a Castile, back from the dead. Meanwhile, the normal world will never even know the truth. By 3 a.m, Gabriel's expensive lawyer is already feeding the police a manufactured lie. It brings us to a cold, heavy lesson about the world. The official truth is usually decided by whoever has enough money to buy the loudest megaphone. In any broken city, the powerful always write their own history. Hidden beneath expensive bribes, the brutal shootout is quietly filed away as a botched jewel heist by a nameless gang. The morning news swallows it whole, keeping Gabriel's dark empire spotless. But down in the whispering shadows of the criminal underworld, the real story spreads like a deadly virus. From the Russian syndicates to the Yakuza bosses, everyone understands that Gabriel has claimed the last Romano heir as his lethal queen. He simply watches her in the quiet shadows of the armored back seat. The perfect secretary who used to silently pour his coffee is irreversibly dead. It leaves us with a haunting realization. A person can hide their true nature for years, burying it deep in the dark, but the fire inside will always burn the disguise to ash when the right moment finally arrives. Picture this scene with me, bathed in the tragic glow of the streetlights. Sitting right there is a literal mafia princess, covered in the violent aftermath of the man she just destroyed. She ended a life without a single second of hesitation, purely to keep Gabriel breathing. He gets that dark, hungry look in his eyes and tells her she saved his life. Clarissa looks right back, her pale features set in stone. She reminds him that he gave her a sanctuary when the world wanted her dead, so her debt is paid. But Gabriel leans in, the leather seat creaking, and drops his voice into a dangerous whisper. They are way past settling debts. He tells her she belongs to him now. Here is a simple, bleeding lesson. Real loyalty is never built on keeping score. It is built entirely on surviving the absolute worst moments together. He drops the ultimate, terrifying confession right there in the dark, telling her he belongs to her too. Without waiting for permission, Gabriel grabs the back of her neck and pulls her into a desperate, bruising kiss. This is not some gentle romance. It is pure, explosive relief, mixed with 2 agonizing years of bottled-up tension violently breaking free. It tastes like expensive champagne, heavy gun smoke, and raw adrenaline. Clarissa gasps softly, grabbing his ripped jacket to pull him even closer. For 2 years, she played it safe, burying her fierce soul behind fake glasses and plain sweaters. But now, that dam is completely shattered. She kisses him back with wild, desperate energy. Remember this simple truth. You can run from who you are for a while, but your true passion always demands to be felt. Gabriel pulls her tight against his chest. That heavy platinum ring on her finger presses hard into his shoulder, a physical reminder that their new alliance was forged in blood and gunpowder. Catching their ragged breath, they rest their foreheads together in the cold shadows. Clarissa whispers that Christian Moretti is never going to back down from this betrayal. She warns that he will head straight to Chicago and call the cartels for heavy backup. Gabriel just gives an absolutely unhinged smirk. He tells her to let him try, because Moretti has zero clue what kind of monster he just woke up. Here is the big takeaway from their dark confession. Never underestimate the absolute power of a solid partnership. When you have the right loyal person standing by your side, you can face down absolutely any storm the world throws at you. The camera focuses on his scarred profile as Gabriel lays out the brutal master plan. He is calling a meeting with the commission tomorrow morning. They will merge their broken families, and instead of playing defense, they are going straight for Moretti's throat. Clarissa stares back, completely soaking in the wild, magnetic energy of the man who turned her into the deadliest queen in the city. She is done hiding in the shadow. With a terrifying, breathtaking smile, she agrees to burn his entire empire to ashes. Their ride pulls into the underground garage, the heavy steel gates slamming shut to lock out the chaos. Stick with me here, because it shows a beautiful truth. True growth happens the exact moment you stop running. Sometimes you have to burn down your own insecurities to step into the real power you were always meant to hold. Gabriel steps out of the armored vehicle and hands her out like dark royalty. Clarissa takes his hand, her sharp heels echoing loudly on the cold concrete. She walks incredibly tall, radiating a freezing, regal swagger as she enters her new domain. The weak, frightened version of her is completely dead, and the beast she morphed into is absolutely stunning to watch. She went from an ignored secretary grabbing coffee to a savage mafia queen taking out armed hitmen in a shredded designer dress. Their chemistry in the dim garage lighting is completely off the charts. This leaves us with a vital life lesson for tonight. Right as the screen fades to black, never judge a book by its cover or underestimate the quiet ones in the background. The people society ignores often possess the hidden strength to completely flip the board and outrun the entire game. You and I have watched this tragedy unfold, but let us be entirely honest as we reach the end. Did any of you see that savage betrayal by the Moretti family coming, or that beautifully violent shootout in the hotel lobby? My own heart is still racing in my chest. If this dark, tear-jerking drama had you holding your breath, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and stick around so you never miss our deep dives into these cinematic revenge stories. Drop a comment below and tell me your favorite moment of Clarissa reclaiming her lost throne. The most meaningful lesson to take from her survival is this: you hold the only pen to your own life story. Never let a cruel world write your final chapter. Stay safe out there in the dark.